Everybody's a storyteller. That little voice in your head, that's telling a story. You talking to a friend, telling a story. Our culture, talking in all the many languages of newspapers and television and movies and social conversation in churches and synagogues and mosques, we're all telling stories. Scientific laboratories, we're all telling stories. And not all stories are created equal, but one thing that all stories share is that they are incomplete. None of us has the capacity to tell the complete story, and we never will, frankly. The complete story is beyond our tiny scale, and we just have to get used to that. But not all stories are created equal. Some stories paint a picture that is so wildly incomplete that it falls apart on close examination. So what's an example of this? So let's take a look at this. Let's start at the individual level. An individual whose story is all people are evil, right? And there are people out there who just walk around the world convinced that other human beings, by virtue of being other human beings, are bad and to be avoided. That's born of their experience. They've had, obviously, anyone with a story like that, if we knew their life story, we would know how they came to it. But it's woefully incomplete. That person cannot see the really wonderful people in the world because the story is getting in the way of what is so. And each of us at the individual level has blind spots in our stories. And some of those blind spots are simply buried in our subconscious. We don't even know that we have these blind spots. That's why they're called blind spots. Shared stories are like that too. They can be so woefully incomplete that they just collapse under close examination. Give you an example. There is a commonly shared story in the human community that life is about win-lose. In order for me to win, you have to lose. Now, when we look at this story, we start to see its fingerprints on inconvenient truths like this. We have plenty of food in the world, and yet today, 25,000 people, mostly children, will die of starvation. How can this be true? I mean, how can it be true that in a planet where we have enough food for everyone, today, over 20,000 people, mainly children, will die of starvation? And if we look closely, it's likely because a significant part of the shared conversation is, if I'm going to win, you have to lose. Somebody has to lose. And so we need to hold our stories lightly so that we can open them up to close examination and hopefully let them become ever more inclusive, ever more true. They'll never be completely true, but we can improve our stories. At the individual level, we can improve them by opening up our subconscious to ourselves, moving that hidden energy in ourselves. And if you ask how, I've got hundreds of videos on this, just check the channel. Examining those stories that are lurking behind our eyeballs that we don't even know we carry around. Trust me, you've got them, I've got them, we've all got them. And we need to be engaged in an ongoing process of unearthing these hidden stories that cloud our vision. Same with the shared stories we have. We need to be in a constant process of examining the stories we don't even know we have as a community, as a people, as a species, opening up to examination and adding more perspectives. So what is a really good story? A really good story takes in more perspectives than a really bad story, which takes in one perspective. A person who sees only one angle of a situation is not going to tell as good a story as a person who can see this angle and this angle and this angle and this angle. And so that should tell us that to the extent that we can expand our perspectives toward the end of being multi-perspectival, or if we were truly evolved, omni-perspectival, to take into account all of the perspectives, the scientist, the mythic, the poet, the worker, take into account all of the perspectives. Now that's a good story. So I invite all of us to continually examine, what is the story that I'm telling? What is the story that my family is telling? What is the story that our community is telling? What is the story that humanity is telling? And what can I do to improve my share of that story? How do we improve? By taking in more and more perspectives. Be well.